this way. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, man?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Nice to finally meet you. How's everything coming along?
Likewise. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I'm glad to help. But what's going on for you?
So I have this very peculiar problem because English is not my first language. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, so it's Spanish. So I'm having this difficult time when it comes to the reading comprehension section to make it click to like understand what I'm reading. Like I'm reading the passages and then I'm like my brain is like blank. Like nothing is happening. Even though I just started your course like 2 weeks ago. I'm doing the logic games, and I'll ask you a little bit about that by the end. But I have been studying for the LSAT since November, and I had other courses that I was paying for, and I did learn some of the foundations, and that was helpful. But when it comes to the reading comprehension, it's just sometimes my brain just nothing. And
Understood. I mean,
yeah,
first off, your situation's not that unique. I work with plenty of non-native English
okay,
speakers, and many of them do have this exact problem. And also, there are plenty of native English speakers who have that sort of problem too. If you're
okay,
not a native speaker, it can take a little bit longer, but it can be conquered just the same. And I would recommend looking at my reading comp deep dive sessions in the course because
hmm,
I'll spend an entire hour going over one reading comp passage in depth, breaking it down sentence by sentence, word by word, trying to explain it in simpler language. And that's what I encourage you to do as well. I'm just demoing what I would be looking for you to do. So if you see a complex word, can you find a way to replace it with a simpler word?
okay, okay, yeah, because that is like freaking me out.
I get that. I get that. It's these passages can be really intimidating for anybody. And just know that it could take you a little bit longer than it might take somebody else, but you can conquer it in the end. It's just a question of I think a lot of times the vocabulary in particular.
Yeah, and this I think I just get afraid when I look at the whole five or four passages, and I'm like, what? That like the paragraph. Sorry, I see them all, and I'm like, my brain just stops. It's just weird. It's a weird sensation.
No, I get that. I mean, that fight or flight happens in a lot of LSAT questions, not even just reading comp. So I'd encourage you to see what can we do to break it down into the individual smallest possible pieces so that you have a step-by-step approach so that
Okay,
if that freeze impulse happens, do you have backup ideas of what to do?
okay. Because I when I was doing logical reasoning at the beginning, I was struggling, but now I understand more how to go about them and do them. I haven't gotten to that part in your course yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be learning super fast. Um, Same thing with the logic games. I That was the part I was like freaked out about as well, because I'm not very good at math, but over time I've started to look at the exam as something like, well, what are they trying to do to trick me? And
Yes.
I started doing your logic games, and I was like, oh, this is just a formula that you have to apply and follow. And uh, I want to thank you because I really learned how to attack the games. So thank you. Uh,
That's
uh,
fantastic to hear. I'm happy.
and but the same thing happens with the games. I'm doing them, and let me see. I'm doing week one, and I'm doing like the last set of games there, like 65, for example, game four, and those seem to be more complex. And my brain starts, my gears stop working again because I think I have it nailed down. Oh, I have to do this and I have to do this, and it's like completely different. So I don't know if I should be approaching these games mechanically or I don't know how to explain it. Try to do more inferences in my head.
Well, it comes back to that same idea. If you're frozen, What's your step-by-step process?
Okay.
Mechanical, yes and no. On the one hand, step-by-step can be mechanical, but you also have to have multiple step-by-step approaches in case one falls away, or if plan A doesn't work, you go to plan B. So I've laid that out in the course as well. So for each of the sections. But inference making up front is a great way to go about it. That's definitely one strategy I'd recommend.
Yeah, and so far the inferences that I'm making is like I take more time doing them, but they help me throughout the games. So that's awesome. I've been learning how to do that better. But then there are certain games when I get to question 2, which is not the I forgot the name of
the orientation, like you're beyond the orientation.
Yeah, those are fairly easy. But then I get to the second question, I'm like, okay, how do I diagram this? And then I end up with this mess. And I'm like,
I've seen worse. That's pretty good.
I lose my train of thought. I'm like, oh wait, should I be doing R/T or? And then I'm like, okay, I lost myself in this. They got me. So how do I go about, I don't know, making this like a simpler process where if I get lost in all the annotations that I'm doing, I can go back and say, oh, wait, this is what I was doing. Continue doing this. Don't get lost in writing everything down. I don't know how to explain it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. One thing is that, I mean, your notebook looked pretty good to me. But the issue is that if you find it messy and you find that it's lacking organization in terms of how you could understand it, then that requires having a more of a template approach to making your diagrams, meaning that you always lay things out the same way. So, for example, you could list the variables in the upper left. So the specific letters associated, list those in the upper left. Below those, list each individual rule. To the center right, you could put your main diagram there. You could list inferences below that as you make connections between the rules. And over time, you could see which parts of that you truly need, which parts you don't need. And you can consider rearranging. Then you could, below that, you could have the individual question diagrams when applicable. But consistency will create some order for you so that you're not feeling lost or scattered with it. Similarly, you can have rules for yourself in terms of every single time I encounter a new game, I read the initial paragraph, I decide what game type is this, broadly speaking, ordering, grouping, a combination, or something random outside the box. And then your different approaches in terms of your default way of setting those up.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. So let's say I'm going to take the exam in April. So let's say, is there a way I could upgrade maybe in March? How does that process work? If I wanted to upgrade just to see more, have more interaction with you and the group for maybe a month, how would I go about doing that?
Yeah, just reach out, shoot me an email, and we'll work it out.
Okay, perfect. And when it comes to logical reasoning, should I be looking at what type of flaw is the passage requiring for me to analyze before I attack the question? Like, should that be something that I would be like, oh, they're trying to get me with this flaw so I could understand it better?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that. For any logical reasoning question containing an argument, I would recommend you look at what's the gap in the argument. Okay. And is it a gap that's reasonable or unreasonable? If it's a fundamentally flawed argument, that's definitely important to note. And then you can go into the answer choices with that flaw in mind. For a flaw question, they'll just ask you to articulate the flaw, but you've got to have your own idea of it in order to solve the question efficiently.
Okay. And so I'm right now, like I said at the beginning, I'm doing your logic games. I'm in week 1. I'm a little bit behind, but I'm trying to catch up so I could do it day by day. It's just right now it's, time is a little bit tight, but I do work on something every day. Like, even if I can't do a game, I listen to the podcast while walking my dog, like 2 times a day. I always try to be current on what you're doing, and it helps me. It helps me a lot. But when it comes to the games themselves, should I be doing more games than the ones on the schedule that you sent me? Or should I just do those and then just continue the schedule?
It depends. If you feel that you're at a risk of falling behind by doing additional games of a certain type, then you might just want to keep moving forward. So
Okay.
I wouldn't want you to I wouldn't want you to layer more and more obligations on top of yourself if you already feel like you're falling behind. You can also work in some additional practice on certain game types later down the line if you feel that you're still kind of shaky on a certain game type. But there's always that push and pull between moving ahead onto a new topic versus solidifying the previous one. But I'd say if you're roughly feeling, let's say 80% pretty good in terms of your accuracy, then it's totally fine to move on. But if you're at like 40% accuracy on everything, then it's time to think about, do you want to go for a different test date instead? Because I want you to go into test day feeling good. And sometimes people push back their test dates, and that's normal. It's probably more common than not, actually, because life gets in the way. So it's understandable, and this exam is hard. But know that down the line, there will be additional opportunities to work on logic games, for example, in the context of individual timed sections.
Okay. Well, I don't have any more questions for you.
Well, I'm glad that we connected, Josue. Keep at it, and let me know if you need anything moving forward.
I will. Thank you so much, Steve. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.